Hey guys, it's Sykes. Today I just wanted to talk about how I approach my vocal EQ. Last time I recorded a vocal tutorial, it went over everything that goes into mixing a vocal in the actual vocal chain. So I figured this time I was going to try to do shorter videos on specific topics so they don't run too long, and hopefully they're a bit easier to sit through and watch. Between what I say in this video and that video, I will probably contradict myself. I would listen to what I say in this one, as it's newer. I've gotten a lot better at mixing, and if I do anything differently or disagree with anything that I said in that video, it's probably for the better. Anyways, let's jump right in. As an example, I decided to use a session take from the hook-only song Heavy, as I really don't want this video to get claimed. I had a couple others that I would have wanted to post to get claimed just because of the song I was using, so hopefully this will get claimed. To start, I'll just play how the vocal sounds without anything done to it.
But I ain't finna share my drugs, like I ain't finna share my love. My shotgun is in the trunk, yeah, I'm down to share some slugs.
I'll also play how it sounds over the beat.
But I ain't finna share my drugs, like I ain't finna share my love. My shotgun is in the trunk, yeah, I'm down to share some slugs.
Okay. Now the first thing I usually reach for in my vocal chain is EQ, and I usually go with an SSL style EQ. So here I've got the one I've been using most recently, the UAD SSL. This is how it looks when you open it up by default, pretty much. I just turned everything on, so everything is enabled. Usually I do use the other components, the dynamics section with the compressor and expander, and also the filters. But I'm going to mainly focus on talking about these EQ knobs here for this video. Usually I use a technique that I'm going to refer to as frequency combing, where you essentially pan through all the different frequencies and see which ones are a bit too strong, don't sound very good, anything like that that you want to reduce. And I usually do try to mostly cut when I'm EQing vocals. There's really only one region that I actually boost, and I'll get to that later. I usually like to start going from lower frequencies to higher frequencies. So I'll start here on this black knob. I usually use the black setting on an SSL. Most of them will have either the black or the brown choice, or it'll be black or brown. I don't know exactly what the difference is, but it's just my preference. So usually I'll take it to the lowest frequency that that band can do. If it has a width of the bell curve knob here, I will turn it to the highest, but this one does not, so I won't bother. And then I'll usually turn this up 4, maybe 5, maybe 6 dBs to start, and then I'll play the vocal and sweep this band here until I find the frequency that I want to place the center of the bell at and cut. One thing I'd like to mention about these SSL EQs, I do like them a lot, but most of them do not cut or boost exactly where you're setting them to cut or boost. So if you set this bottom knob to the default 200 as a bell curve, it is not centered at 200. So you can't like look at a graphic EQ like the Pro Q3 or anything else and then come to this EQ and use like whatever you see. Really, you shouldn't mix with your eyes at all, but even if you are trying to do that, you cannot do that with most SSLs, just as like a note. All right, so now I will show you how that usually looks like. So I ended up thinking that 317 hertz on this low frequency band is where it sounded the worst when it was boosted. So that's where I'm going to be doing a cut. When you're EQing almost anything, but especially a vocal, less is usually more. So try not to cut too much out of any one frequency range. And always make sure that as you're mixing, you're going back and adjusting as needed based on what the other plugins are doing and how they're making the vocal sound. I ended up landing on a negative 2.1 dB cut to start. This can obviously change after EQing the other bands or later on in the chain after I use more plugins, but that's a good starting point to at least address some of the issues with the vocal. I would then repeat this process for all of the bands. So again, turn the band all the way down to the lowest of the range it has, make the bell curve as tight as it can be, then you should boost about 4 to 6 dB. The less you have to boost to be able to hear where you want to put the cut, the better, because the louder you go, the worse any frequency will sound. This method is fairly widely used, but it does have some very common criticisms, one of them being that once you start to boost frequencies a lot, every frequency sounds bad, which is true. If you boost things too much, every frequency can sound bad. But what this method is meant for is to comb through and find the areas where it's the worst. I'll now do the lower mid frequency band. I ended up landing on about 808 hertz on this. I'll just reiterate again, that's not exactly where the cut is going to be, but that is the point on this band where I thought the boost sounded the worst and where I thought it was making problem frequencies and problem areas worse. Then, in the order, I'd suggest picking an initial cut that you want to do, and then you should resize the band afterwards. For now, I decided on a negative 2.8 dB cut, and I decided on a Q of 2.35. Generally, I keep my Q value between 2 and 3, often closer to 2, but use your ears to pick. The SSL Q values are quite wide, generally, so even a 2 or a 3 is probably not as wide as you think. Now I'll do the high-mid frequency band, same process. For this band, I ended up at about 1,230 hertz. This band is measured in kilohertz, as it says here, so it's in the thousands. So even though I'm only on about 1.23, that's 1,230. Next, I'll do the level of the cut. I landed on about negative 1.3. Next, I'll do the Q. I landed on about 2.51. And then next in the SSL, this is optional and very much on a song-to-song basis, but you can do a little bit of a high boost. I usually leave this on shelf, and again, less is more. I would keep it as small as possible as to not make the song too harsh. You can always get more brightness by adjusting the other frequency bands and cutting them more. I ended up doing a 0.4 dB boost at 9 kilohertz to start. Now I'll let the vocal play with all of the EQ that I've done so far on it.
But I ain't finna share my drugs, like I ain't finna share my love. My shotgun is in the trunk. Yeah, I'm down to share some slugs. Got it out the mud. Yeah, oxycodone put me in my zone, got me itching. Fuck my own in my kitchen. Mama came in and said, Jared, why you tripping? Yeah.
Now, like I said, there are other SSL emulation plugins that you could use. The other one that I've had a lot of experience with is Waves, but there are others. They all sound a little bit different, but they all function very similarly, so the process would be the same. One more thing that I do in the SSL that relates to the EQ is usually use the high pass, low cut filter just to get rid of some of the lower frequencies that don't have any important musical information or that have a lot of plosives, like P sounds, B sounds, D sounds. I usually use values of this anywhere from about 60 hertz to 120 hertz, but usually 80 to 100 is the range where I'll fall in. Again, very much a song-to-song basis type of thing, and how high or low he was singing and whether or not there's a lot of headphone bleed, whatnot. For the song, I just put it at about 86.6. For the most part, I'd just set this pretty quickly to somewhere in the frequency range that I had said, so long as you can hear that it isn't affecting the overall sound of the vocal in any way. And if the low end gives you any problems later on in the vocal chain or in the song, you can obviously come back and adjust it. As a bonus, since I said that the band locations are not exactly accurate, I'm going to show you what this EQ actually looks like using an EQ curve analyzer. It's free, and I will put either a link or the name of the plugin in the description, so you guys can go get it if you're interested in seeing what some of your analog EQs are doing to your vocals. Like I said before, I wouldn't mix with your eyes, but it's not a bad idea to know some of the intricacies of the plugin that you're using. So this is what the EQ curve looks like. Here's our low cut. I put it at 86 or so. So it doesn't actually cut all the way at 86. It cuts a little bit lower. It has like a little bit of a softer slope to it. Then here's a cut at 191. If you can see here, it's actually at like 317 hertz. So it's a lot lower than it said it was. This cut is at 400 750 or so. Again, this was put at 808 hertz, so much lower than it says it is. And then this band is at around 1.27 thousand hertz, and I had it at about 1.23 thousand hertz. So this high mid frequency band is pretty close to what it says it is. And then this top shelf here, it's hard to see exactly where it begins just because this is coming off of this cut, but it obviously starts somewhere down here by like 2000 hertz, even though this is set to 9000. After the SSL, sometimes I still think that a vocal needs more EQ work that I wasn't able to do with the SSL, which is then when I'll reach for a Pro Q3 usually, but any other parametric EQ works. I have another example here as the REQ4. This has very similar functionality to the Pro Q3, but almost any parametric EQ will work. For example, the stock FL one, that will work too, whatever your preference is. My process for using the Pro Q3 and SSL are pretty similar. I still do the frequency combing, but I do it at a much tighter Q, usually 4 to 5, maybe even 6. And it's much more focused on individual frequencies rather than those wider bell curves that you saw with the EQ analyzer from the SSL. I personally don't hear any glaring issues with the EQ, but for the sake of the video, I will still show how I usually frequency comb. The same as on the SSL, you do a boost, then you can see here, there's a Q value, the decibels, and the hertz. If you either grab the band or you come down here, you can change the settings. On the actual band itself, moving it around is what changes the frequency and the hertz, but you can actually also change the bell curve by using a scroll wheel. So I'll scroll till I'm somewhere between 4 and 6, usually like 5 or so. And then I'll do the same thing that I do on the SSL. It's just a little bit more focused and precise. That frequency is not particularly strong, but it sounds a little bit ugly. So I'm going to duck it a little bit, come down here, instead of boosting, duck it. And again, less is more. So I'd stay kind of in the lower range. If you're having a lot of problems with the frequencies, or maybe later on you're doing a lot of compression and they're coming back up, you can obviously cut more, use your ears, but I'd say try to be conservative with this. And then you just repeat the same process for any other problem frequencies you can find, if there are any. And then after that, I'm done with my vocal EQ. If I do any more changes or do any more work on it, it's returning back to these plugins and changing the values of what I already found, or addressing any additional problem frequencies that come up later on in the mix. I hope some of you found this helpful and maybe learned something. Let me know if there's anything you disagree with or you think that I did wrong down in the comments below. And also let me know what else you guys would want to see from me. That's all from me. Peace out.
But I ain't finna share my drugs, like I ain't finna share my love. My shotgun is in the trunk. Yeah, I'm down to share some slugs. Got it out the mud. Yeah, oxycodone put me in my zone, got me itching. Fuck my own in my kitchen. Mama came in and said, Jared, why you tripping? Yeah.